So this cycle, we're going to talk about some of the conservation issues with the ocean. And so we're going to talk about like some of the pollution problems and then some of the sustainable fishing problems. Okay, and so this is a quote from Jared Diamond, who's a professor of geology at UCLA. And he says, "The United States has long thought of itself as the land of infinite plenty. And historically we did have abundant resources. But now we are slowly exhausting our fisheries, our topsoil, our water. On top of that, we're coming to the end of our world resources." So we have been doing a very poor job at conserving what we have, and we're fast approaching the time when we will be using it all up. So one of the major problems in the ocean that we find is pollution. So there's tons of pollution in the ocean. And the definition of pollution is anything that has a measurable negative impact on natural populations. So remember when we talked about eutrophication? And eutrophication is the process where you get too many nutrients in, and then you get like a phytoplankton bloom, and it blocks all the sunlight from the other producers. Remember that? Okay. So eutrophication is the result of too many nutrients, right? And nutrients typically are a good thing, but when you get them in too high of a concentration, they become bad, and they actually become a form of pollution, because it has a measurable negative impact on natural populations. So, nutrients can even be pollution. So it's anything that can have a measurable negative impact. You have two types of pollutants. You have point source pollutants and non-point source pollutants. Point source pollutants are things that you can point to the source, like where it came from. So those would be things like if a sewage plant spilled a bunch of sewage into the ocean, we know exactly where that pollution came from. We can point to the source. So it's a point source pollutant. A non-point source pollutant is a pollutant that enters the environment just in general. So from most likely storm runoff. So it's like somebody litters, that trash gets on the street, it rains, it gets washed into the storm drain, and then washed into the ocean. But when we see that piece of trash, we're not like, oh, Robbie threw that in the ocean. Okay, so we don't know exactly who was responsible for that pollution. Does that make sense? So it's non-point source. So here's a picture to help you see this. You have point sources where you have factories dumping things into the water. And then you've got agricultural non-point sources, forest non-point sources, and then urban non-point sources. Urban is going to be a lot of like runoff from streets, so any sort of trash, oils, stuff like that on the street. The forest could be even like nutrients from animal poop, or also like if you go camping and you dump stuff, or like fishing line that gets in the water. And then agriculture is mostly going to be like nutrients that get washed into the water. So those are pollution, those types of pollution. One of the major types of pollution that we find in the ocean is litter, trash. So our oceans are hugely polluted with trash. And every year in September, we do what's called Coastal Cleanup Day. So we go around and volunteers all over the world pick up trash off of the beaches. And so these are the stats from September of 2007. I also have some more recent stats as well. But in September 2007, all these volunteers went to the beaches and they picked up about 6 million pounds of trash in 3 hours. That's a lot of trash. Okay, 6 million pounds in 3 hours. The most extensive part of the cleanup was in the U.S., where we picked up almost 4 million pounds of trash just from our beaches alone. Okay, that doesn't even count the other countries. So that was from about almost 10,000 approximately miles of shoreline. That averages 390 pounds of trash per mile. So you go to the beach, every mile of beach has approximately 390 pounds of trash. That's a lot of trash. A lot of trash. Some of the kind of things that they found about 1.3 million cigarette butts and filters, which is enough to make nearly 125,000 packs of cigarettes. So it's a lot of cigarettes. So that comes from like people smoking and then they just toss the butt like on the ground. Then that gets washed into the ocean and then washed back up onto the beaches. So it's bad. They found glass bottles, metal cans, the really freaky one, like syringes, needles.
By the water.
Okay, or the bum on the streets of LA shooting up with cocaine or heroin or whatever, and then just tossing the syringe and it gets washed into the water and onto the beach. About 61% of the trash they collected was plastic, and they found about 250 animals in the debris that were dead.
It's like the seals and stuff.
Okay, so this is a breakdown of like the kinds of things that they found. So about 59 or 57.9% were shoreline and recreational activities. So that would include things like food wrappers, cans, lids, cups, like forks, plates, knives, like that sort of thing, the plastic stuff, toys, all sorts of stuff. And then about 31% of it was smoking-related activities, going to include things like cigarettes and filters and lighters and stuff like that. And then about, let's see, I think that's, there you go, 8.2% is ocean and waterway activities. So those are going to be things like buoys, strapping bands, rope, fishing line, all sorts of stuff. And then dumping activities, 2.3%, but it's going to be things like you find cars and tires and like appliances on the beach. Yeah, because somebody doesn't, like, no, not in the water, on the shoreline. Because somebody just dumps a car somewhere. They don't want to. The really gross part is this 1% that's the medical and personal hygiene. So that's like used condoms, used tampons, diapers, yeah, all of that gross stuff. Okay, so syringes again, that's gross. That's only about 1% of what we find though. Okay, so here's some stats from 2011. So these are the weird things that they found. Okay. Okay, so about 140 televisions, they found toilet seats, that's weird. Almost 200 cell phones, shopping carts, barbecues, fireworks, you can see. Here, the clothing that they found, so they found like 266,997 articles of clothing, which was enough to clothe every person that was present at the 2012 opening ceremonies for the Olympics. So it's a lot of clothing. Here's also crazy. They found enough food packaging for you to get takeout for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 858 years. That's how much food packaging they found on the beach. It's a lot of food packaging. Here's the volunteers, how many pounds of trash they found in 2011, 9.1 million pounds of trash, a lot of trash, over nearly 21,000 miles. Here's the top 10 participating countries, so the US is number 1, Philippines number 2, Canada number 3, you can see the rest. And then here's the top 10 items that we found, so cigarettes, caps, plastic bottles, plastic bags, food wrappers, cups, plates, glass beverage bottles, straws, beverage cans, and paper bags made up about 80% of what they found. So those top 10 things made up about 80% of what they found. And then these were the kinds of animals that they found trapped in the trash and dead. So birds, mammals, reptiles, okay, corals and sponges, fish, invertebrates. You can see that. So it's a problem. And most of the things that you just saw, those were plastic. Most of the trash that we find in the ocean and on our shorelines are plastic. And the problem with plastic is that it is persistent. So it lasts for several hundred years. So a 6-pack ring holder for like a 6-pack of beer or a 6-pack of soda, that 6-pack ring holder will be in the ocean and last for about 450 years before it's no longer considered to be harmful to the environment. So it sticks around for a long time. After 450 years, it's still there, but it's just not considered to be damaging at that point. Okay, the problem with plastic is not only is it persistent, but it also entangles things. So we've talked about this before, but it'll entangle wildlife, and like it can get on appendages of animals when they're young, and then as they grow, that thing that's on their arm or their leg can actually cut off the circulation and cause them to lose their arm or their appendage. It can also choke them. So we saw that picture of the sea lion that had that ring around its neck that had cut into the neck of the sea lion. And we've also talked about this all year, but they die with their stomachs full of plastic.
And dolphins.
Yeah, and the problem is too, it's not even limited to small animals. You get big animals like whales, the big whales that can actually get entangled in a lot of this plastic stuff, and they can drown and die because of it as well. So it's not just something for small animals. And then scientists estimate that about 1 million tons of plastic enters our oceans every year, which is a lot. There's so much trash in our oceans that we have now garbage patches in our oceans. So where these plastics have gotten into the ocean, and then the gyres that are in the northern part of the Pacific, those currents, as they move around, they will concentrate the plastics and stuff in the center of those gyres. And so now we've got these big, huge patches of trash in the middle of the ocean. These patches are twice the size of Texas and 30 feet deep. So it's not just a little bit, it's a lot. Okay? There's a lot of trash. And there's no way really for us to clean that up. So no country has the budget to be able to go and go out there and try and clean it up. And a lot of it is the little pieces of plastic like you saw. If you were to take a net and try and filter that out of the water, the size of the net would have to be so small that you'd also get a lot of things like copepods and stuff like that. You can filter those guys out of the water too, which are the second step of the food chain and critical for the ocean ecosystem. So it's not an easy problem to fix at this point. So it's bad. Okay. Resources. So pollution's a problem, plastic is a problem, but we do get a lot of resources from the ocean, which is why we need to conserve our oceans and make sure that they are healthy, because we get a lot of stuff from them. You have two types of resources. You have renewable resources and finite resources. Renewable resources are resources that can be replaced with time. So, for example, wood. If you chop down a tree but you plant another tree, the tree that you plant will replace the one that you chopped out. So eventually it will replace itself. Fish are also considered to be a renewable resource because if you only catch so many fish and you leave some of them behind, the ones that you leave behind will reproduce and replace themselves. Unless you don't catch them sustainably and then you take them all out and then they all die. It's bad. A finite resource, though, is something that once you get all of it out, so once you mine all the gold in the world, there is no more. So there's only so much of it on Earth, and after that it's done. So gold would be an example. Also, fresh water is also a finite resource. And while we do get some recycling of the water through the water cycle, there's only some percentage of the water on Earth that is involved in that water cycle at any given time. So there's only actually so much fresh water on Earth. Okay, so you have renewable and finite resources. One of the things that we get from the ocean that could be considered to be a renewable resource, as long as it's done properly, is fish and other animals. So the things that we actually want to get out of the ocean, like the fish and the crabs and stuff that we like to eat, those we would call our targeted take, or our target take. So those are the things that we target to get out of the ocean. So those are going to be the plants and the animals that you want to catch. So you can have all sorts of different kinds of things. Like algae. You can also have different kinds of invertebrates like shellfish. So you can use clams, oysters, scallops, and mussels. You also get things like crab and shrimp and lobster. You get sea urchins for uni. You also get all sorts of different kinds of fish. So sardines, anchovies, mackerel, tuna, salmon, so on and so forth. And then we also use some of the targeted take as tropical ornamentation. So we take live rock or coral, and then all sorts of reef fish to be part of our aquariums that we like to keep in our houses. So targeted take are the things that we mean to get, that we want to catch. Bycatch. bycatch are things that we catch that we don't mean to. So those, we could like not want them because either they're too small or they're too big or there's no market for them, but we still catch them. And bycatch is actually a huge issue because many times once like the bycatch is caught with what we actually want, we just toss them back overboard. And many times when we toss them back overboard, they're already dead at that point. So remember when we talked about the Ted and like the turtles and the shrimp fishermen? So the shrimp fishermen were catching lots of green sea turtles, and then the turtles, by the time they pulled up the nets, the turtles were drowned and dead. So one of the problems with bycatch is that by the time we get those nets back up to the boat, the things that are in there have already died. So there's no possible way for it to make its way back to its habitat and like continue its role. We also have the problem of some of the things can't actually make it back to their habitat. So if you pull up deep sea animals, because you're trawling or something like that, and you pull them up, and if they're not already dead, there's no way that they can make it back down to the deep sea from the epipelagic without either dying or something eating them on the way down. So no way they can return to that habitat. And then also, when you toss them back, a lot of times if they are still alive, they're kind of stunned, disoriented, and then very vulnerable to predators, so they get eaten as well. So it's bad because these animals are dying at crazy rates just for us to get a few things that we want.